Hi, Linda. It's really nice to see you again. It's been a lot of years since I saw you last. I'm since retired, but
Mhm.
this legacy series has become near and dear to my heart in my 80s. So I'm glad that we can be together. And, many times when people have introduced me, I've often wished that they focused on things other than what they picked. So I'd like to start out with you and ask you, what would be maybe five things that you would like people to know about your career? Just where have you been? What have you been doing? What's important to you?
Oh gosh. Probably a couple of things, five things. But anyway, first let me start by saying thank you, Sharon, for inviting me to participate in the series. It is delightful to see you again and to know that post-retirement there are some of us who don't ever quit and stay
Social workers
engaged
never
in the
retire. Yeah.
exactly, stay engaged in the work and in the field, and it's just remarkable, and it's lovely to see you here and doing this is such a great idea. So thank you for inviting me to participate. Five things that people to know. So I used to have, when I was a child protection worker, I started in the field as a child protection investigator back in the day. So that's one thing. But what I will tell you about that is that I had a manager at the time, and one of the things that he used to say to me, he said, most of us, he was an MSW social worker, dedicated social worker, did this work and had done it for many years. He said, Linda, most of us fell into this work. And he said, and you're one of the few people I know who actually didn't fall into this work. You came here on purpose.
Wow. Okay.
And I think that was very true. I started as a child protection worker, as I said. I worked in foster care, I worked in adoptions, I worked in adolescent services. Did direct practice and macro practice and program level practice and policy practice. So I've been around a minute and I've done a bunch of different things across my career in child welfare. Um, and each one of those things kind of grows out of my upbringing, which is I was raised by an engineer and a social worker. My dad was an engineer, my mom was a social worker, and the two of them taught me the two things that I probably are the things that I do most, regardless of what I'm doing. And one is that it's important to take care of people. People matter. And I think the second is the notion that problems can be solved. You just take them apart, put them back together again, and understand the component parts, and you solve the problem. And my dad, as an engineer, taught me problem solving.
Okay.
Um, and for me, that sort of approach to problem solving kind of applies whether you're a scientist or a human services person, a social worker, or whatever, that there are human problems that we all face. They're all human problems, whether they're science problems, practical problems, people problems, they're all human problems. And they require human solutions. And so that's kind of the work that I've sort of felt that I've needed to do, that solving the problems of people is what matters to me.
That's beautiful. My father was an engineer too, and until you just said what you said, I didn't put the pieces together, but he really did teach that to me as well.
Yeah, it's
Well,
amazing.
you just gave me an interesting gift. Thank you very much.
Well,
Um,
when you're in seventh grade and your dad says to you, I have a seventh grade project, Dad, for science, and I don't know what to do. And the next thing I knew, I was in the basement making a motor.
that's right. That is great. And your mom was a social worker. Did she work in child welfare as
She
well?
did.
Oh,
Yeah. She worked in everything. She started one of the very early minority adoption projects in the country back in the late 70s, early 80s. She did that work right around the time that One Church, One Child was starting. You remember, Sharon?
yes, yes.
Yeah, and she did that work, but she started as a child protection worker. She actually started as an AFDC worker, and then a child protection worker, and then did foster care and adoption, adolescents, teen parent program. She started a creative teen parent program, etc. She was a problem solver as well. Yeah, she was a social worker. So I grew up going to her groups in high school. She used to take me to her groups, her teen parent groups, and of course, I got to be the babysitter for the babies because I was like 15. So I got to be the babysitter for the babies, and she did the groups, and the person that she had assisting her with the groups was a social work student, um, who later became my supervisor and my director is when I became a child protection worker some years later.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
And
literally
where
10
did,
years later, she was my manager.
that's amazing. Where did all this occur? What part of the
I
country?
started in Rhode Island. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you're an East Coaster.
I'm an East Coaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually didn't start in child welfare. I did start my career in developmental disability. So I did work in developmental disabilities for a couple of years before I went into child welfare.
Uh-huh. Now, when I met you several years ago, you were in Montreal as were you a professor for a while in Canada? No.
No, no, I was never in Montreal. So I went from Rhode Island. I went to work for one of the federally funded child welfare resource centers as their adoption specialist in New England
All right.
and the Boston Center. And then I worked for the state agency for a while there as a program manager. And then I went to work for Child Welfare League of America. And I worked there for 22 years before I went back to Massachusetts as commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families. And
Okay.
now I'm back at CWLA because most people my age are probably retired already, but I chose not to retire. So I'm back as CEO of the Child Welfare League.
And would you like to say anything about CWLA, what it's doing under your tutelage?
Oh gosh, we're doing a lot of things. You know, CWLA, I was exposed first to CWLA when I was 16 by my mom at a regional conference, and I saw the journals that the Child Welfare League was publishing. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I was like totally amazed. Um, and that I ended up working there was quite something. You know, we're doing now a good deal of work. We're in quote unquote, interesting times, as they say,
Yes.
with lots of changes at the federal level, et cetera. So we just completed in January, right before the inauguration and coming into the new administration, a new strategic plan. So we are working on what I would call the next generation of program standards. Standards and best practices is something that Child Welfare League has done for many years.
Yes.
And we're really looking to really modernize the standards and think about how they're implemented in the context of this crazy world that we live in. How do we make them more doable? How do we make them more implementable? How do we support agencies in doing that? We also have a new policy agenda. I think one of the things that we have always known, but sometimes need to relearn in this field, is that the things that get children and families into child welfare systems often begin with the stuff of basic needs, right? With the ability to put a roof over a head, to make clothing and food and resources and support to deal with the problems that families have before they get in trouble. So we're really leaning into this idea of not only improving child welfare practice, but also improving the nation's ability to support willingness and ability, because it is willingness and ability to support the needs of families before they become involved, which means dealing with root causes like racism and poverty.
Right. Right. Boy, this is a big journey you're on.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
big journey.
yeah, and I'm glad that you're there. That's exciting. Um, have you ever taught it in the college system to impart your many years of experience?
Oh, limited. I probably will be doing more teaching as time allows now. I taught this semester, as a matter of fact. I taught research at Simmons, co-taught a research course at Simmons School of Social Work this spring, and I'll probably be teaching. I'm hoping to teach policy in the fall. We haven't worked out all the details. Um, and I've done lots of guest lecturing. I was fortunate a couple of years ago to have a Harvard case study built on some of the work that I did in Massachusetts on how do you make change, right? I think the case study is called the, Commissioner Spears and the movement to go fast, right? How do you get reforms done quickly? So we worked with Harvard to develop a to the Kennedy School to develop a case study, and I was able to work with the faculty there some colleagues to co-teach that for their public policy grad students, which was kind of fun.
Would that be something that people watching your interview would be able to tap into and learn from?
I don't know if it's accessible. I don't know if they require, I have no idea. But certainly, and I don't know what's publicly accessible. I'd have to check with the folks at Kennedy School to see.
Okay, well, maybe we can circle back to that in a minute.
Yeah.
You know, the work that you're doing is exhausting and you've been doing it for a long time. What do you do outside of your work that gives you pleasure?
So I'm a, so the couple of things that are probably most important to me. One is I like to read, so I relax. I read, I do a fair amount of reading. I meditate and do yoga. So, because meditation is easy. It's something you can do almost anywhere you are for 5 minutes or 5 hours, depending on what you need in the moment.
Right.
And I grew up on the beach,
Uh-huh.
so I am a beach girl.
Uh-huh.
There is nothing more relaxing than the sounds of waves.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm by the beach too. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the best medicine there is. There's something about the salt air and the sound of waves that just is magic in the world. So if I really need a respite, I do that. Now that I'm back in the DC area, it's a bit harder to get there than it was when I was in New England, but it's only a couple of hours away, and I've been known to hop in my car and say I need a beach day
Good.
and head across the, Bay Bridge and get to the Eastern Shore.
It's so important. I ask this question with a real purpose because I'm aware that, particularly for young professionals, that there's a burnout rate in our field. And if we don't learn to take care of ourselves while we're taking care of so many other people, we don't go the length that we could go. You and I are
Hmm.
good examples of hanging in there. And I think it's because we've done other things to give us joy.
Yeah,
And so I always ask that question in terms of what do people do to kind of get them out of the head and into their body and into some relaxation. So
right. Yeah,
meditation and it is so important and finding a place of solace, which is so
right.
important.
And
Yeah.
it's a three-parter. Place of solace, being in your body and not in your head, because your head's only a part of your body,
Right.
right? So you live in your head, you will be in misery for the rest of forever because our heads tell us all kinds of things, most of which aren't true, but just feed our worry and anxiety, right?
Absolutely. And you
And I
obviously have
think
a
the
sense
other
of
thing is
humor.
being in community. I mean, part of the joy of the work is the people that you do it with, right? And
Yeah.
understanding we're not perfect. Human beings make mistakes. We're fatally flawed each and every day. But the best times I have had in this work are the people I work with, are the partners and the people we all play with on projects. It's the community in child welfare, and you have to be in it long enough to feel like you've built a sense of community with the people that you work with. To me, that matters a great deal.
Oh, that speaks to my heart. The very first agency I ever worked in, there were 10 of us brand new social workers. To this day, we're now all old and retired. We get together every 6 months because we became extended family. So that really is something that's so important to us. And for those people who work across state lines, which you obviously have,
Mhm.
we make friends all over the
You
place.
make friends all over the country. Yeah,
Yes.
which has been great. And I used to tell new social workers when we did new social worker trainings, look around the room, and they'd be brand new. They had no idea what the job they were getting ready to do. They really were clueless. But I said, look around the room and get to look at these faces because you're going to be looking at these faces for a long time. There will be some of you who will leave the field who decide that you can't do this, but there will be a core group of you who will stay and you will be friends for the rest of your life.
Right. Right. That's the rewards out of the hard
Mhm,
work over time.
mhm.
So someday you're going to get to retire. Few of us die sitting at the desk. So just curious, what do you hope people will remember and say about you?
Um, Gosh, I'm not good at this stuff, but I think the most important thing is for me is bringing the creativity, energy, commitment, and hard work. I always say that you only lose when you quit on a project. You only lose the ability to do it when you give up, right? So don't give
Yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah.
Don't give up. Try something new and understand that you will make mistakes along the way. So for me, I hope people just think about um, the fact that I listen, hear, incorporate what people tell me because I don't claim to be the expert. People call me an expert. I'm an expert because I surround myself with amazing good people, right? And that they enable me to be an expert. They enable me to learn throughout my career what I need to know. And I approach everything with a sense of learning is paramount. And continuous improvement is how we get from here to there. So go the next step. And I have this mantra of do the next right thing. And that's it. Just do the next thing that's the right thing to do. So I hope people take away from that, from my life, that's the way that's the way I did the work.
And I
And the successes along the way, they're all what they are. Somebody will come along and do better the next, we'll go the next step, and go the next step and the next step. The progress is incremental, the progress is continuous. I don't own the whole progress. I own steps in the process.
absolutely. And I think I would in the process of this legacy interview, and I think all of us kind of got to a point where the longer we live and the more we do in the field, the less we feel we know for sure.
Hmm.
And if
Hmm.
we could instill that into new social workers, you're never going to know enough always to get it right. And that's okay. Just
Yeah.
keep doing it. That's
Yeah.
the thing we ask of you. So
Mhm.
it's nice to hear you say that and reinforce
Yeah.
that. I want to circle back for a minute. Assuming that there are young people in the field or people interested in our field that are watching this particular interview, what do you want? You talked about what you would say to new social workers, how you want to make change as quickly as possible, and we certainly all feel that way. What would be some things you'd want them to know? These are the things coming from Linda Spears that I want you to take away from this time together.
Yeah, I think um number one, openness. I think it's incredibly important. Young social workers today live in an anxiety-provoking world.
Mhm.
They live in a high stress, anxiety-provoking world that is difficult to manage. And I think that there are times when our commitment to social justice gets equated to mean a commitment to perfection,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And social justice is a generational endeavor, right? I look at where the world is today, and social workers are rightly impatient and unhappy, right?
Mhm.
And but I think with the benefit of hindsight and experience, I was a kid, during the civil rights era, and my mother used to take me to demonstrations. And when in that generation, they thought they got something done, and they did,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And they did. My parents' generation got a lot of good work done.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we fail to understand that things like civil rights and social justice and equity and all those things that we all care about are one and done endeavors in this country, and they're not.
Mhm.
People are humans. They sometimes need to relearn lessons that the past generations have learned.
Yes.
And the good news is we will relearn it as a culture. We will relearn the things that we learned in the 60s. We'll relearn the things that we learned in Reconstruction. We'll relearn those things again. And I think the ability to see long haul, to carry in patience today, but not to be bowled over by it, right? Not to be bowled over and overwhelmed by the change, the what I would regression in our change, right? Regression in periods of time because societies regress.
Boy, is that an
Humans
important
regress.
piece?
And
Oh,
it's not that you accept it, it's that you understand it as a normal part of the process and you keep going.
hmm.
So for me, helping social workers not be bowled over by the little stuff.
Okay.
Right. The course I taught this last semester, I was like, oh my God, these kids, if they're gonna worry about something being 24 hours longer than they thought it was gonna be, they'll never make it. Right? The
Yeah,
world is full of things that don't happen the way they're supposed to happen.
right.
Our job as social workers is not to accept, but to problem solve how do we get those things moving, right? As opposed to simply being righteously indignant. Righteous indignation is not a work strategy. Right?
Yes,
We can be righteous and we can be indignant, but it doesn't get the job done.
that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Keep putting your nose to the grindstone to
You got to
get it
put your nose to the grindstone and figure out what the change is that needs to
right.
happen.
Right.
I,
And
you know, just I recently had a friend that was hospitalized and he needed to be discharged, wanted to be discharged. And it's like, well, we could have sat there and lamented the fact that the medical staff wasn't doing what we wanted them to do, or we could pull out our, social work skills and sort of figure out what were the barriers that they were dealing with that was meaning we weren't getting what we needed done, right? That's what you do. That's what social
right.
workers do. We solve the problems.
That's right. That's right. And I don't think anybody's mentioned before in any of the series that we need to accept the fact that sometimes we go backwards and then we have to reteach and go forward again.
Yeah. Yep.
Because there is that feeling that I hear a lot of, oh my gosh, we went through all that already. We didn't make any progress. Nobody ever really learned it. I'm done. And the truth is, if you can see this as cyclical,
It is cyclical. Yeah.
then it gives you hope. And actually, we've learned from what came before.
Hmm.
Now we have even better tools to move everybody forward.
Exactly. And the tools that we had at the time, and the tools of the civil rights era, which were a lot of legal strategies and, social activism, et cetera, worked to accomplish what needed to be done, which was to embed a certain set of rights in law. And, we'll have to clean up on some of those things because some of that has eroded. But more importantly, now we're on to something that's really much more personal for people, right? We're on to how do we change hearts and minds, which is a deeper set of values and principles. If that we're at the point to change hearts and minds means that we've actually made a lot of progress on the legal side.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, in terms of change, are there some techniques that you want to point out that people could use?
I think, I think about agency change, and for me, it is a combination of factors that I think matter. Um, One, I worked for Governor Charlie Baker in Massachusetts for 8 years. And one of the th mantras that he had was that people are policy.
Hmm.
And I thought it was astounding and remarkable because who you have doing work and how they do the work really means what the policy is. I mean, there's a book called Street Level Bureaucracy, and people vote with their behavior, right?
Yeah.
They make change that they embrace, or they don't make change because they didn't embrace it. So paying attention to people always matters. Being able to chart your course and your progress, understanding where you've been and where you're going. Um, Measuring progress and communicating progress, I think matters. I think you have to, it's sort of the, the workshop mantra when you're doing a training. You tell people what you're going to do, then you do it, then you tell people at the end, you remind them of what you just did, right? So I think thinking about how you're communicating out what the change is, how you engage people in change. When I took over the agency in Massachusetts, one of the things that and it was the case is that managers and leaders had not been engaged in the process of change.
Mm,
They just, for whatever reason, right? I think people thought that they were engaging people, but in reality, they weren't. And what that meant was that people's heads were down and they were looking down at the work tasks in front of them. And they hadn't lifted their heads to say, this is what needs to happen to make the work better. They
mhm,
hadn't been engaged in those discussions. So, their thinking wasn't as systems what it was. They weren't thinking change strategies, they were thinking day-to-day tasks. And when you want people to change their day-to-day tasks, they have to think, they have to understand the big picture. So by bringing those people to the table to understand the big picture, you got buy-in, you got support, and the people became the policy that you thought needed to happen because they owned it. Right? They helped create it and they owned it. So I didn't have to lead, I didn't have to police them. We measured our progress, but I didn't have to say, are you not doing X, Y, and Z? They came to me and say, this doesn't work or this does work.
okay.
And I think that's what you want. You want people to own the work, right? You want people's voices matter. It's just like people we serve, kids and families' voices matter. Social workers' voices matter, and leader voices matter. All the voices matter.
They all matter. And in that regard, I was going to ask you, since we're all in this to acknowledge, change, support families and children, whether it's foster care or adoption, do you have a message for those folks who are really in the front lines, the ones who are doing the parenting, the kinship families, the foster families, the adoptive families? So many now are impacted and connected to the public welfare system. Do you have a message for them?
I think, always connect, 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 reach out, reach out, reach out, no matter what. No matter what role you're in, um, the importance of connectedness is incredible. No one knows how hard it is to parent until you're parenting. No one knows how hard it is to foster or adopt until you're fostering or adopting. We all think we can do it. And we live in a culture of self-reliance and independence. That is not how you succeed in child welfare. It is not how anyone in child welfare, workers, birth families, adoptive families, young people, foster families, it is not how any of us do this job the best. The way we do it the best is to work together
Okay.
and to partner. So connect, connect, connect. That adoptive parent down the street, that adoptive foster parent that shows up at the peer-to-peer lesson. That foster parent may have been through what you're dealing with, may have strategies to help you, may have thoughts and ideas. Connect, connect, connect. And say what you need and talk about the things that you're worrying about, but also bring your expertise and knowledge and listen, because people have good things to say.
That's great. And you've been wonderful. You've given us a ton of really wonderful statements that people can write down and learn from,
Hmm.
walk away with kind of imprinted on their chest, for which I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's just wonderful to see you and to see you still working and making a difference in the country. Actually, what you do here impacts the world in terms of social work, and I appreciate that about you very much. Appreciate your taking the time to do the interview. I know people are going to learn so much from our time together. And I truly am grateful that you're still there and at the helm of the Child Welfare League. I really am. So it's good to
Thank
see
you.
you again. Stay healthy.
You
And
too. Stay
stay,
healthy. Keep doing this. This matters.
it
It
does
truly
matter.
matters for young social workers to do this. I can remember as a young social worker, the voices of experience. I just, they
Yeah.
taught me everything I know. So
Yes,
this matters.
it's so important. And I'm so aware because I hang out lately for a variety of reasons with a lot of young people in their early 20s. And they are lacking so much information. They're hungry for guidance.
Hmm.
And I know that these interviews can provide that for so many of them.
Good.
So, thank you.